Welcome to the program. I'm David Scott. Our guest today is Michael Leccese, and for the past decade, he's been the director of Urban Land Institute, ULI, Colorado. He's also been, in my view, integral to the growth of Denver as a world-class city, and we're really pleased and honored to have Michael join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Good to be here.
Good. You're also, full disclosure, a columnist for the magazine that I edit, Colorado Construction and Design.
That is correct.
And one of the really bright, articulate voices in the magazine. We're grateful to have that contribution. But the reason I invited you for the first video in this Architecture for Humanity film series is because you can potentially provide maybe a 25,000-foot view of where Denver has come over the last couple decades that you've been here, and where you see us now and where you see us going. Maybe if you could give us a little background about you and Urban Land Institute.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I am a native of Brooklyn, New York. Although when I grew up in Brooklyn, it was not fashionable to say so. I told people you were from somewhere on Long Island, but not Brooklyn. So so much of the world has changed. Although I had a wonderful urban upbringing in an Italian-American family where most people didn't drive. And we always walked places and used transit and had wonderful services right in our neighborhood. So I feel like that set my template for my life. As far as coming to Colorado, when we came here 22 years ago, really just looking for an escape from the big city, oddly enough, of Washington, D.C., and a place to raise kids. And my wife and I settled on coming to Boulder. Came to Denver for the first time in 1989. I thought, well, it's kind of a nice city. It's got some good bones.
So for those who don't know, give us a little bit of background about Urban Land Institute and how you came to that position.
Okay, well, I was recruited to come work for ULI 10 years ago. I had been working as a journalist and then running my own communications company. And in that work, I came in contact for the first time with a lot of ULI members, some of the developers who were doing the infill projects and the redevelopment projects in Denver. So I joined ULI because that seemed to be their cohort. And then the organization really started growing in the early part of this century, focusing on transit-oriented development and the Fast Tracks network. And that really appealed to me personally as well. So when ULI Colorado reached a certain threshold of about 1,000 members, the parent organization said, well, we can support this local organization with more of a staff. And Casey Wilkins and myself were hired about the same time in 2005. It was a very good time with Fast Tracks actually being passed, a lot of planning going on around TOD, and also we were hosting the fall meeting 2006 big national meeting with 6,500 people coming from all over the world to see what was happening in Denver. So it was a very exciting time. It was good for me. I think I tried to make a contribution to the organization, but very proud of what our members have been able to accomplish, because ULI is primarily a volunteer organization. And we're only as good as our volunteers, and luckily they are literally the leaders in their fields, whether it be architecture, planning, development, real estate law, etc.
You mentioned transit-oriented development. I think we called you in the magazine I gotta look at how we said it, the bicycle helmeted living emblem of conscious urbanism. Is that a fair moniker?
That is a fair moniker.
We see. I mean, you're really walking the walk in that you can be seen, riding your bike around the city. You take public transport as much as you can. You come down from Boulder.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
Well, it's in my blood. I mentioned I was raised in Brooklyn. I had an uncle who was probably the world's greatest pedestrian. He just loved to walk. And if my Uncle Danny said, we're going to Coney Island, we were walking there, and it was 5 miles away, 5 miles back. So that was kind of the culture I grew up in. Like I said, a lot of folks in my neighborhood were immigrants who never got driver's licenses and didn't drive. Plus, we were in New York City with all this transit, and it just kind of became ingrained in the way I lived my life. I did eventually get a driver's license and a car, but in moving to Colorado, I was very conscious, with my wife, of landing in a neighborhood with a public school nearby, rec center, bus transit, bicycle trails, all those things. And so that's allowed me to continue a pretty urban lifestyle. Coming to ULI, I became a commuter to Denver, and again, the RTD service between Denver and Boulder is pretty good. So between bicycle and walking and using the bus, and now our wonderful car share systems we have here at B-Cycle, I'm able to leave my car at home about 95% of the time. Interesting aside, when I moved to Washington, D.C. in 1977, I think it was a very similar juncture with Denver and the transit. DC now has a 120-mile metro system, but at the time it had 4 miles. It was really an automobile city. People were not accustomed to using transit. The transit wasn't that great. It's changed a lot. I really enjoy going back and using the metro and walking. The walkability of the city and the bikeability has improved tremendously, the transit service. So I think we're seeing this cultural shift and infrastructure shift in Denver now with the build out of the fast tracks system and more people looking to live in walkable neighborhoods, work in walkable neighborhoods, realizing that's good for their mental and physical health. It's a good for land use and the environment, and I'm just enjoying seeing the transition. It takes a generation, but we are well into it.
Well, we're going to see a change a lot over 20 years. My parents typeset Westward magazine when I was growing up, and Westward used to be on 15th Street under the viaduct, and it was just kind of a dark, seedy area. Much of Lodo famously was that way. You talked about a little bit of where it's come since you've gotten here. What do you see for the next couple decades down through the corridor of opportunity and here in Lodo?
Well, the interesting thing about Denver is it still has a lot of room to grow. There are just a tremendous number of infill sites here, and they're not nearly absorbed, even with all the development we've seen, and a substantial increase in the city's population. I think it's gone up 20% since maybe 1995. I think the challenge will be to take this millennial audience, these folks who are maybe now just kind of matching up, but they haven't started hatching yet, having children, for example, and keeping them in the city. So the challenges are, what kind of housing will they need? Is it available? It's not going to be your single-family house in a large lot in the suburbs, but it's a good place to raise a family. And then the school system, which has definitely shown some improvement under Tom Boasberg, my neighbor, and increased its enrollment. It'll be interesting to see if they can keep up in a competitive environment where you've got very good school districts in adjacent communities. So I'm just talking about the city proper here. As far as the suburbs, they all seem to want something of what Denver's got, at least one area of town, whether it's Arvada or Littleton or Boulder, where you've got a dense, walkable, transit-rich environment. And I find that really encouraging, because for years suburban development just meant strip shopping and master plan communities and not much other diversity. This has been a real sea change for a lot of the suburban communities. And the more it tracks along with fast tracks, I think the healthier our community will be.
Yeah, one of the things I caught through your LinkedIn campaign, you did elsewhere too, was asking people if you could take an X number of blocks stretch in a blighted area of Denver Metro, where you think we should go, what sort of projects do you tell us a little bit about that, where it's come?
Yeah, that was in response to a grant we got from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the Colorado Oil Foundation to study healthy corridors. And this is a relatively new initiative area for ULI, and it goes back about 2 or 3 years now. And the idea is to link public health to the built environment. Now, you probably read that we have a lot of declining health indicators in this country, rising rates of chronic disease such as diabetes and heart disease. And there's been some really good, solid research relating that not just to diet, but to the way people live, what their urban environment makes available to them. So ULI has been doing a lot of studying in that area to make recommendations to communities, what they might change that will improve the health of their citizens. So we currently have studied 4 different areas around the state, and we're about to embark on a study through this Wood Foundation grant of the Federal Boulevard corridor from 52nd to 72nd. Our challenge is to, we do this with volunteers who are putting forward their expertise, is to come up with ways to stitch that all together into a healthy corridor. Now what that is, we're going to find out in July when we do our workshop, we hope. But it's one of those things that won't happen overnight. It'll be a generational challenge. It took a long time to make those kind of strips as bad as they are. It'll take a long time to fix them.
What are some of the social challenges that start becoming ameliorated when you take those approaches?
That's an excellent question. One is to engage the community. Some of these communities, and I'm not a sociologist, but my understanding, and I've observed this, is there's you don't want to come in and be condescending and
Right.
tell them what to do.
Uh-huh.
You want the answers to come from the communities themselves, and that's a challenge because of language and culture. So that would be a big one. Another one is actually affecting people's habits. How do you change folks' habits if they're used to eating unhealthy food and they have a very pressing schedule? Couples where they're both working 2 jobs. How do you substitute that kind of fast food diet for a healthier diet in a way that'll benefit them and their children? How do you get people to walk and use transit when their jobs are scattered throughout the region? What's the alternative to that? A lot of it is, I guess, a social underlying cause as well. Is how do you finance changes? These are not things that a real estate developer will come in and change. They involve a lot of public infrastructure and programming, and of course we don't have a lot of extra money to fund those sorts of things in Colorado. So
A place close to here, we're shooting Shears Atkins Rockmore, which is right by Tattered Cover in Lodo, but it's sort of catty corner is the new Denver Union Station development, and you see a mixture of high and low there, in which you don't want to say high and low. I don't know if that sounds politically incorrect, but it's essentially people of vastly different backgrounds and classes and approaches to life, concussing off of each other, mingling really comfortably, and just living in this grand living room together in a very easy, amenable way, which I think probably is a benefit to both sides of that equation.
that's a really interesting example. Again, it'll be fascinating to follow that over time. It's less than a year old as a project. There have been some public complaints, I think, in the Denver Post about that not being a very diverse space, not representing Denver population, which is 50% plus people of color. And it does have a lot of high-end restaurants in the Great Hall, for example. But I think if you go there in the summer and see the folks coming in on the long-distance trains, watch the Cub Scouts running through the fountains in front, and if you take the site as a whole and how people are using the public spaces, it is richer than that. It is more representative of the whole city. And again, it'll be interesting to see where it goes. It is a privately managed public space, so it's not going to become a homeless shelter. I don't think that would be an appropriate use, but there are definitely people who are welcome and not welcome in Denver Union Station, and raises an interesting debate about how we manage our public spaces and who are they for.
Yeah, to some degree, though, people coming in from train or even bus from elsewhere, who are just travelers in our city, who wouldn't be considered sort of affluent urbanites, seem to be mingling comfortably, and
the train, the Amtrak crowd seems to be very middle class Americana. Last summer I go through, because I take the intercity bus. I go through several times a day, and one day at 5 o'clock there was a woman clearly from Amish country with a gingham dress and a headdress, sitting on a bench next to Dana Crawford, who had a martini. And I just thought, this is what it's all about. This is really pretty neat. So you do see little vignettes like that, and all kinds of folks. It's also interesting to see this, even before the station reopened, so many tourists down with cameras on the level of folks visiting the state capitol or Red Rocks. I mean, people are clearly impressed with this project and very proud of it. And I think that's just a wonderful statement of civic pride in itself.
Yeah, if you could treat that as a case study to show people what Urban Land Institute is about, what have you done to contribute? I know that you've done in a lot of visible and invisible ways, laid the path along with people like Dana to make that whole revitalization of this neighborhood happen.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about some of those touch points?
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful case study for ULI ethic. What happened at DUS was mostly the result of ULI members doing their jobs. ULI is all about public-private partnerships, meaning that the public sector does their thing by providing the infrastructure, kind of creates a template for the private sector to come in and build a quality product. And that's just a great example. So you get the transportation improvements, the new plaza, the new bus terminal, the new bays for different types of trains, and so forth. And that has spurred I think the number is now $1.8 billion of private investment, including all those apartments in the master plan area, the adjacent wing buildings for offices for Terra Resources and IMA, for example, the Crawford Hotel itself. So you have a lot of moving parts. It's not simple real estate of, gee, I bought a piece of land, I'm going to go get a loan and build a standalone building. It's the opposite of that. And ULI members in the work really embrace that complexity. They're patient, they're willing to put the time in to make those kinds of projects happen. It's not kind of an easy kill scenario by any means. You're talking about financial return.
Right.
And they're dedicated to creating good quality, in some cases like this, great quality projects. So I think it's, we just gave the project our Impact Award, which is our Colorado-wide award, and it's been nominated for our ULI Award for Excellence, which is global. And I rather expect it will win that award. So I think we're going to get a lot of recognition for what's been done there.
And I'm always curious about the human aspect that really brings these deals together. You hear the legends of Donald Sewell writing on a cocktail napkin and seeing Denver Center take shape just over a cocktail.
I think I'll be speaking very extemporaneously here,
Okay.
not for the historical record.
Right.
I think it really all goes back to fast tracks. So we're talking 2003, 2004 range. The vision for Denver Union Station as a transit hub was really the key element, the most transformative. And it wouldn't have happened if we didn't have a transit system to build around the hub. So around 2004, there was a master plan for Denver Union Station that kind of created a lot of detail, but it created that vision for what it could be. It really all grew from that. The developers like the Dana Crawfords and the East-West really came in later. They kind of plugged into the plan and created the places that realized the plan's vision. So I just think it's a great example of something Denver does extremely well, which is investing in public infrastructure as truly an incentive for development.
That's great.
But not just any development. The right type of development that's compact, that's dense, that respects historic context, usable for a wide number of folks. And you can look at project after project in Denver. Central Platte Valley would be another great example of that. It's another project that's won the ULI wide award. Stapleton, I think, has much to commend it and really grew out of a vision. The developer came later. It had to get the commitment to the parks and the infrastructure first, or no developer would touch that site. So we were lucky to get Forest City to come in. To one of the few companies able to take on a project of that scope over 30 years.
One of the benefits of the column that you write for Colorado Construction and Design is similar to what Michael Gifford brings with AGC is again, a 25,000-foot view. We're looking at the national legislative picture. We're looking at the world design picture in some of your articles. Tell us a little bit about some developments in design around the world where certain cities really get some of those touch points right that give them. Your friend put Denver in the top 10. Would you put Denver in the top 10?
I would put Denver in the
being
top 10.
well-traveled guy?
Become highly partisan. I'm very impressed with what's happened here. I talked a lot about Denver, but I think we have a lot to commend statewide, and it's particularly interesting for me as a transplant to see what the mountain resort communities are really like. And we think of them as being these rural retreats, but they're little urban labs in their own right. They're very dense. They have sophisticated alt modes of transportation because all the skiers can't just be driving. They have to face the affordable housing issue head on. And there have been some hits and misses, but I find Vail and Aspen and Breckenridge and places like that to be equally fascinating urban environments with all the same issues we face in Metro Denver. And they've done some really innovative things to deal with those issues.
Well, I would encourage anybody who's continues to be curious to check out Michael's column in Colorado Construction and Design, which is witty and urbane and subtle and wonderful. And we really appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks. You. Great to be here.